It's a quick math that obviously was flawed.
Okay. Welcome back to the part 2 of the Advisory Committee's public hearings. Just quickly to reintroduce our committee, we have George Pucci on my left, Eric Seary, Annie Rubin, Ann Williams, Mary Wolf, Jeff Rudin, Vicki Rellis, and Russ Pollack. When we ended on Saturday, we were discussing Article 23. We had heard from the proponents as well as the public comment and had then brought the discussion up to the advisory table. And that's where I would like to pick it up again. So I'm going to try and vote this article by 7:30. And
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you recall, we had requested,
yes, you'll have an opportunity.
because we didn't have a full team on Saturday. We have our full team. We have council here. We have Collins Center here. We're ready.
Right. No, we'll make time for that.
Thank you.
So,
May I take a moment, Mr. Chairman, to convene our board?
Please.
So, given the agenda as it stands, I move that we.
Accept the agenda, yes. I
Good.
second.
All in favor? Aye. We stand convened. Sorry, thank you.
okay, and I think maybe the best way to get started, unless there are still questions on part of the committee, is maybe just to go down the line, starting with Russ, and sort of give an idea of where you are and what questions are still in your mind.
Briefly, last year, my points on this or a similar article were that, I was concerned that I think we have a divided town that at this point is still concerned about whether this article will vest additional power in the Board of Selectmen. I commented last year, is there any reason, sorry Pat, do I need to start over? I commented last year, is there any reason why the town administrator has to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen as opposed to another elected town official? The second question I have in my mind is, I don't know if I'm at a point yet where I fully understand the importance of this and why this can't be done after the gentleman has a couple of years on the job under his belt. I mean, my attitude is let him do his job, then we can figure out how to best utilize him and create a job description for him. So those would be my comments and questions, and I'll pass the mic.
I would like to say ditto, but I do have a few things to add. I think my biggest concern is the implications that are in the overview are a little bit ambiguous, and the implications that of power, implicit or not power, that the Board of Selectmen has through all of this. It's just not clear to me, so I'd like to have go through that a little bit more. I do believe in the position, the town administrator position. I do believe that there should be some powers given to that person as time goes on, because I do believe that this needs to be managed process and have some real, that person can have some power to do things that they need to do to change the town. So I just want to get some clarity on some issues.
I guess with respect to the fundamental initial point, with respect to the fundamental initial point of whether the treasurer and the tax collector should be merged and whether that should be an appointed position, I think that my left brain, my analytical brain, tells me that there will come a moment in time in this town when that will happen. I think merging those positions sounds to me as if they will be efficient and effective. I think, however, it's a very emotional issue for this town. And I think that there is no pressing need to move that position together and have it appointed at this moment, considering that we will both grandfather and grandmother the positions under the proposal. So it won't be immediate. Secondly, I think Mike Lee talked about some numbers. Those numbers were challenged. I think the reality is that any realistic assessment of savings with respect to those positions being merged in the near term will result in a realistic way in savings that will amount in a rounded fashion of 0% of our expense budget. And that being the case, I think there really is no pressing need. I think it will happen eventually, not so much for the economics, but because I think there will come a time when we may not have the right people in town, either who want to serve in those positions or will be qualified. And I think then, as a practical matter, we will move to an appointment of those positions. But I think, given the emotional nature of that issue in town now, there's no pressing need to move forward on it. We don't gain very much, and we lose a lot of harmony in the town by doing it. So I would say, on that aspect, we should not move forward for that reason. With respect to the other provisions, I think if we strip out of Article 23, those, and I think it's an easy drafting exercise, strip out in its entirety those provisions that, one, relate to the merging of the offices for the reasons I mentioned. Secondly, those, I think it's 3 articles, maybe 4, that talk about, in terms which I'm sure were not intended, but leave the impression that the town administrator will essentially be exerting authority and jurisdiction in areas that are not right now within the selectmen's jurisdiction. If those come out, I think Article 23 is quite honestly fine. It talks about coordinating procurement, it talks about coordinating employment activities, it talks about facilities. Those are not controversial issues. Those do not allow, for those who fear it, the selectmen aggregating too much power. I've now been in this job for 3 years. This town is hardly at risk of having power aggregated in one group. We have like about 500 committees who do about 600 different things. I am not concerned if we allow the town administrator to do facilities and to do employment and to do procurement and contracts, which those efficiencies are apparent to me. So I think if you redact in the sections that don't relate to those areas and let him work in a coordinating fashion, we'll be fine. So that's where I stand on it.
I feel much the same way that people have already spoken about, but I would add also that I find Article 23 and Article 24 confusing between themselves, and then there's confusion with Article 35 as well. And I don't think we've had the time or the expertise or the experience with the new town administrator to completely understand what not the overview so much, but the details that are in the weeds are going to turn out to be. One of the things that I find I disagree most with Article 23 is the combining of the 2 aspects of it, the combining of the town treasurer and collector, and the definition of the town administrator's job. I don't understand why those would be in a single article. It seems to me that those should be dealt with separately. And I reiterate what Jeff said about the conflicting stories that we're getting of how much money would be saved, how much money would not be saved. And I actually have a problem with comparing with other towns. What I would like to see is, once the town administrator is working and people are aware that this, potential issue exists, I don't even know if it's an issue, that we compare the savings that could happen against what we're doing now versus what other towns are doing. So in other words, if we looked at our own town and what would it be like if we combined these positions versus what it is with these positions separate, I think we could get a better feel for whether it's the right thing to do or not. In any case, I don't think it's the right time to do this, and so that's fine.
Thanks. I'll reserve my comments for last.
I think mostly I would let go with Jeff's expression. The differences are that I started out actually pretty skeptical, but have become less so the more we've talked about this, even with all the dissension discussion and disagreement and so forth. It's pretty clear to me that this describes the Collins report and DOR report made pretty good case for a good direction for us to be moving in. And so it seems like most of the, or at least my view of what's been said is it's, you know, not that much about where we're going, but how we get there. You know, 23 as it stands, I think I would still have a concern that it's, well, it strikes me as being kind of brittle. Maybe we can get some feedback on that. For example, the question came up about the, you know, how would Recreation Commission be classified, you know, in a group that has vetoes or not vetoes or so forth. And, you know, that got straightened out, but it occurred to me later, you know, what if we do hire a recreation director or something? Do we have to go back to the state and have this thing changed, or can it be crafted in a way that's a little more general in terms of describing, not, you know, enumerating every last item, but, you know, sort of being descriptive so that when a situation comes up, you can see how it fits in without having to redo the whole thing. So I'm probably unique so far in being kind of optimistic about it, but as I say, it's an expression of, you know, I think a plausible and good place for the town to be in a few years. So we'll just have to figure out how to get there.
As the Collins report said, go slow. And I think this issue is much too important, and there's much too much division for this kind of last-minute resolution. We appreciate the people being here, but to be working on this important an issue at the last minute seems to me extremely contradictory to principles of good government. And I'm sort of compelled by Jim Murphy and Frank Jenkins' suggestion of appointing a committee to try to resolve all these separate issues. Who knows who we're missing in addition to the Recreation Commission to get all of these pieces in order. And I think if that commission is appointed, it should also look at the 5-man Board of Selectmen suggestion, which is made in the Collins report. I think the town administrator is functional under current conditions, and there's an obvious reluctance on Section 2 in the combination of the collector and the treasurer that really needs to be separated out of this. So I think it just hasn't been well handled, and it's too important an issue to rush into making a declarative statement at this time.
So there's clearly an overarching goal to get a strong town administrator, and I think I support that. But like many things, you have goals, then you have implementing rules. And the question is this the right implementation, and is the implementation justified? I think, to my way of looking at it, I'm insufficiently certain to go along with this. Seems to me there are a number of issues that are up that have been packaged here. One of them is the merging of the two positions. Right now, you know, there was an economic presentation given the other night, but it was last minute, and people have raised issues about it. I don't think you want to leave something like that hanging. Cost and efficiency was the justification. We don't have a clear line on cost and efficiency, and I think it's up to the people making the change to make the case. I don't think the case was made. For me, there's a second issue about this division between legislative and local control over the rules. I don't think there's been an analytical framework put forward to say why we want to divide things up that way. Why some things should be pushed into legislation, what things should be kept local, and why. It's stated as such, but there hasn't been enough discussion of that, I think, for my way of looking at it. So I think I'd summarize by saying what's the cost of doing nothing? And it seems to me the cost of doing nothing is we don't make forward progress on something we want to make forward progress on, which is strengthening the role of the town administrator and improving our efficiency. But the cost of getting that wrong, in my opinion, is higher. So I would rather lose a year or 18 months or whatever the number is. We know where we're going. I don't think there's a lot of disagreement about the direction we want to head, but I'd rather take more time and not pay the higher cost, which I think could happen if we get that wrong.
My comments are
similar. I actually compliment the Board of Selectmen. I don't see it as a, you know, a untoward process that you've gone through. I think you're dealing with some, you know, very big, high-level issues, and you're trying to follow the recommendations. I think, though, that it's coming in, you know, in these alternative forms, and then people are, you know, rewriting the legislation from the floor at this hearing. I think that when you go in for a special legislation, there has to be an overwhelming consensus, you know, that this is what the town wants exactly in the form that we're proposing it for the special legislation. I very much respect the recommendations of Collins and the DOR. I think that the town is definitely headed in the future. The best practice would be combining the position of treasurer and collector down the line. As Lanny said, though, Collins specifically noted in their report, you know, start now and start slow. And I think that you did start now, and I've sent, you know, a personal email of congratulations when you hired David Williams. You know, it was a lengthy process, but in the end, with the help of Collins, as a recruiter, you definitely got the best candidate, and that includes all the candidates that were before us, you know, when we tried this, when Dan Keyes had first left the town. So you are actually starting now, and when you talk about a strong town administrator, that has to do with the quality of the individual as it does as much as any type of special legislation or a charter provision or a bylaw provision. You know, great individuals can do great things, and, you know, everyone should try, and David Williams is that type of individual that you've gotten, who is obviously going to have the respect of the board. The board is not going to be inclined, in my opinion, to try to micromanage David. I think that, you know, Sherborn is unique, too, in terms of transitioning toward the future. One thing that rings very clear through the Collins and DOR report is that we basically have the best finance team around. I mean, they were very complimentary of our existing finance team. So I think it's a great opportunity with such a high-quality town administrator that we have now, you know, if in transitioning down the line to involve the existing team and David into crafting a piece of special legislation that, you know, comes in one form to us, not in different alternatives. And, you know, perhaps it's even ready for next year to be presented. So I definitely, in summing up, I think what you're trying to do is commendable. I think that that's the future of the town. I think it's only fair to David to give him a little bit of a chance to you know, really get a sense of our local peculiarities and you know, help him to really get up to speed on all the types of volunteers that we have in the town and all the types of competing interests that we have him really get a sense of the community and get a handle on all of the recommendations. And then, you know, when all is said and done, you know, maybe next town meeting season is the time to come with one piece of really carefully crafted special legislation that can get, you know, hopefully unanimous support to go before the legislature on.
Thanks. In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat what Eric and George just said, but I'm fundamentally in favor of this, but I just don't think that we're quite ready yet. And I don't think the timing is terribly critical right now, because we're going to have another 3 years with the incumbents. And I really like the idea of taking a year, putting the committee together, and really honing this and getting it right. You know, I think Jeff was also correct. There will come a point where we're going to have a difficult time filling these positions, perhaps, with elected residents. And I think there's still lots of open questions around the savings and you know, defining of exactly who's in and who's out of the supervisory slot. So again, I would, at this point, be looking to take a year, get it right, and do it next year. So I think it was important for you to hear from us individually and for us to hear each other about this. And I know you've got some things that you want to bring forward.
Yes, as I mentioned before, at the hearing on Saturday, we didn't have our full team here. And so I want to supplement the presentation on Saturday with three pieces of additional evidence, if you will. The first, I would like to call upon the Collins Center, who's agreed to attend tonight, to come forward. We have Dick Kubayashi. Ask him to sit in the chair we've been using, the hot seat, and would ask him, you've heard their concerns, and you were on the team that put together the Collins report. You were also on the team that gave us Dave Williams, for which we are very grateful. And we are very grateful for you to be here tonight. I'd like to ask you to, what's your reactions to what you've heard here and what advice you would give the community?
We know a lot about the substance of changing from a traditional form of municipal administration to a more modern form. What we don't know a lot about in any of our work is the internal processes and rhythms and culture of decision-making in the towns that are our clients. So we pretty much have to leave that to the body to the body politic. I do want to make perhaps just a few observations. The town has in David Williams somebody who can play the role very effectively of town administrator, both in leading, coordinating, being an exemplar of good municipal public administration. I think that was evident in the interviews. It'll be more evident as time goes by. I want to be very, very specific about one thing. In order to maximize the utility, the benefits of somebody who has the requisite skills to be a town administrator, they need the knowledge and interpersonal and communication skills, and they also need a coherent structure that defines the jobs and eliminates ambiguities of what the powers and duties of the position are and what the powers and duties of other town officials are. We can have some arguments about, you know, what works best, but both conditions are required to get the full benefit from a competent town administrator. So how you get there is kind of on your own. I'm going to address very bluntly the question of the treasurer and collector. If you think the job of treasurer and collector for most of the history of the town was a part-time job. Town's been here for 350 years. It's only, you know, kind of in the post-war era that these have become full-time jobs, and the laws under which they work have become more complex. The volumes of dollars flowing through those offices have become much larger than they were a generation or two ago. And there are two fundamental problems with the system of electing. One problem is not obvious, and that is when you have to replace a skilled person, and the only mechanism for replacing the person is to hold an election, the town doesn't know what the skill level of the person will be who happens to win the election. And because this is a relatively small town with only about 4,000 residents, the actual population pool to draw from is small. This is an old-fashioned, antique mechanism. It should be abolished. Perfectly reasonable to give the people in the treasurer and collector's jobs tenure in their positions until they vacate, until they're vacated in normal course. If you have any corporate or nonprofit experience, think about the following. There is a chief financial officer or a company controller, and guess what? The person who handles the money coming in is not appointed to that person, does not report to that person, and exercise and sets their own office hours. And the person on the payable side does the same thing. That's not a structure which is going to lead to a long-term coherent approach. And much of the leadership in running a town has to do with financial control, management, and also financial planning. So those are my arguments for making the change. Don't wait until the positions are vacant. Because when the positions are vacant, the town clerk has a duty to call an election. She has no discretion in that. Since we're not doing anything adverse to the folks who are in the job, tee that up now so that there's a clear mechanism for moving forward when those positions become vacant. Otherwise, you know, the automatic machinery of the election process set by state law will move much faster than the finance committee, the town meeting, and the board of selectmen. Those are my arguments on that one. Be careful about, this is kind of more of another admonition, and then I'll finish. Be careful about worrying too much about whether the town administrator statute, special act, whatever, is perfect. It certainly warrants study. But typically, people pass something, they work with it for a while, and then it's refined. You know, when the country started, there was a constitution. It got ratified over the ensuing few years. Turns out it needed 10 amendments. Okay, I got those 10, and now there's 20 more. You're engaged in a process. It's an important process. And I guess my last thought is, if you defer this, which is not my recommendation, and you have a committee appointed to consider this be careful about what your charge to the committee is. I recommend that in a charge to any committee like that, the charge should be to find the proper mechanism, statute, to implement the DOR report and the Collins report. Do not charge a committee from revisiting the recommendations. Make their charge narrow, focused, and on a timeline. The question should not be if, the question should be how. And how? The answer to how may be a segmented approach. It may be a comprehensive approach. But don't waste time going over ground that's already been gone over. I'm all done. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I thank you. I think that was very valuable.
Very good, thank you.
Any questions for Jake?
Can I ask him a couple of questions to start some thoughts here? In the draft Article 23, have you seen Article 23?
I've seen all three articles, and I must say they kind of blur in my mind.
All right, there you go.
The thing I want to focus on is that in Article 23, there were a couple of key functions, and I wonder if you would talk about are these important functions for what you know of Dave Williams to function well and succeed well in this town, and for this town to succeed in improving itself? I'll just take them one at a time. One is the human relations function. The proposal is to coordinate all hiring and processes through David Williams.
I think I can answer the question in perhaps in a more general way, because I know in a general way the things that are in here.
Okay.
It's HR and procurement and some budgetary coordination and et cetera. Look, it's important that the town have good personnel practices, procedures, and rules for doing ordinary things, like hiring people, like interviewing people, like giving people raises, like figuring out how to terminate and discipline folks. The place really functions like kind of a holding company. We have police over here, and we have ambulance service over there, and we have people doing recreation over here, and we got the water folks, and they all operate in a somewhat autonomous way, and properly so, given their charter. But mostly, they tend to do their own hiring, they do their own personnel work, et cetera. And the people who are elected or appointed to these commissions are not HR specialists. And in the HR world today, there's a great deal of risk in making a mistake. Ask the wrong questions in an interview, make procedural mistakes in hiring or more frequently in termination or discipline, and you wind up in a court someplace. And, it's not the water commissioners that are gonna have to reach into their own pocket to pay a judgment against the town. It's gonna be the taxpayers of the town. They're not well equipped to manage those kinds of processes. And I'm just talking about the process. I'm not talking about the selection of the right candidate. What has worked well many places is to have a town administrator be responsible for the development and the institution of personnel processes that are both fair and protect the town and give some support to the independent boards and commissions. But the real reason for this, more than anything else, I think, is to protect the town from liability. Playing that role does not mean that the town administrator will be the appointing authority for the recreation director, but it's a very important role to have played. The same kind of thing plays out with procurement and some of the other process. These are rule-heavy processes.
Dick, I don't want to cut you
Sure.
off, but I think we've all read the report. And
Okay.
I think, so maybe we can just focus on 23, because we need to get to a vote on that.
Well, does anybody have questions for him as to why?
I don't think so.
All right, then if I could, I'd like to call, like, the next witness, which would,
Can I make one brief comment on 23? We'll be very brief. Seeing as how this is going to wrap it up, I am less than sanguine about the fact that all the discussions that we've had have absolutely missed and well off target for what it was we're looking to do. We're looking to integrate our budget processes, make uniform human resource operations, unify our procurement, and reduce the number of moving parts in all of our operations, for all the reasons that we've all agreed, to make it more efficient, to reduce our liabilities. And instead what we did is got caught up in untangling fishing line instead of sitting down and fishing together to get what we needed done. I regret that. I wish we could have come to addressing the real issues. That's the end of my statement. Thanks, you can go on now.
I'd like to call Barbara San Andre to talk about why we have Article 23 in the form that it's in. And maybe I should start by asking or reminding her that we had asked you to take out of this article anything that could be done locally. So I guess the place to start is everything that's in Article 23 what is necessary to go to the general court?
Yes. The only caveat I would have is that there was a suggestion, I think, at your Saturday hearing, for an interim town administrator provision. And, you know, that's something that could be put in the bylaw, but if you want to put that in here, it certainly can be put in here. But that's why it wasn't in here. What we tried to do, and just to go back a little bit in time, because this has been going on for a little bit of time, is originally, many of you may have seen the original article that was put forward by the Board of Selectmen. It was a very lengthy article. The Board of Selectmen had asked me to prepare a town administrator special act, you know, based on the types of acts that have been put forward in some other towns. And so it was a very long article. It included recall provisions, removal provisions. It included a long list of duties and so on. And there was some feedback saying, well, let's take out anything that we can just put in the town bylaw. So I did. I went back through and took out everything that we could put in the town bylaw. And essentially, you know, the things that are in here are, number one, obviously, is the combining of the treasurer and collector. I mean, I'm sure you all know that's something that has to be done if we want to do it in this form by special legislation. And including, by the way, the grandfathering and I think grandmothering, as somebody mentioned, of the two incumbents.
Can I ask you a question about that real
Sure.
quick?
Yep.
Because 25 and 26 deal with those two issues, but they don't mention anything about getting a special act.
Yes, that's correct. That's a different version of this. In other words, this is set up so that it can be done all in one package.
I understand that, but can 25 and 26 be voted?
Of course they can be voted,
Well,
yes.
Could we implement them as written,
Yes, absolutely.
even though they don't mention anything about going for an act?
No, they don't. There's another procedure you can go through, which is set forth in those two articles. But the issue again is, if you want to do it as part of the Town Administrator Act, you want to have it in the act, because if this passes and then one of those doesn't pass, then, you know, you've got half and half. So that's why it was put in here as part of this particular proposed special act. So, because one of the things we're trying to do in here is we're trying to, you know, as has been mentioned numerous times, we're trying to put certain functions on a more consistent and cohesive basis. And part of that is the financial aspects of the town, which is a very important, obviously, aspect of the town. And so, if we want to have the town administrator be a chief fiscal officer, but he has no control over the treasurer and collector functions, then there's really not a whole lot for him to do. I mean, he can still prepare a budget and so on, but it's really important, if you really want to have your town administrator be your chief financial officer, that the treasurer collector be appointed so that they're within the jurisdiction of the town administrator. And that's why that's part of this package. And again, you know, I don't want to, you know, beat the proverbial dead horse here, but the other things that we were looking at were things such as has been mentioned, you know, the procurement and contracting functions, the personnel functions. It's really, you know, beneficial to the town to put these in one place. And some of those cannot be done simply by bylaws. So, for example, you don't need a special act to designate the town administrator as your chief procurement officer. However, if you want him to sign contracts on behalf of the town, you'll notice that there's a provision in here to do that, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary. If you want him to be able to negotiate all of your collective bargaining agreements, except for the school committee, you have to put that in here. If you want to be able to sign the warrants for payments, that has to be done by special act. So, even though it seems like it's a lengthy document still, believe it or not, the functions that are in here have been pared down significantly from what was first proposed, to try to put in here just the things that really needed to be contained in the special act to make, to advance those interests in a cohesive and comprehensive fashion. And then the thought was, as I understand it, was that if this passes, then there would be bylaws drawn up to complement this, which would be at the next town meeting, because of course, if this passes at town meeting and goes to the legislature, it takes some time to go through the legislative process. This is not something, if town meeting passes it, it's gonna be implemented, the next week or the next month. So that's what we did. So we took all that out. If this passes, we would come forward with proposed bylaws that would go along with this.
I have a
What-
question. Robert, in 23 and 24, the grandfathering of the treasurer collector is in there, but it doesn't appear in the other two articles. And I was wondering if there was a reason for that, or?
The reason for that is that it's not necessary to put it in the other two articles. Yeah, under the state law, if you go through the statutory process, which is Chapter 41, Section 1, then it automatically grandfathers the incumbent.
I see.
The other issue is, and again, this is part of the reason why we wanted to do it through special legislation, is not only are you changing from elected to appointed, but you're also combining the two. So then you have the issue of, well, what if one person decides to resign or retire, halfway through their term, and the other one doesn't? So, you can't combine the two until both of them are vacant. And there are provisions in here for appointing interims and so on in the meantime. So it's a little bit easier when you're trying to combine and change at the same time to do it this way. But you can use the 41, Section 1.
Could I just follow up on that? The two other articles that she's referring to have the Board of Selectmen be the appointing authority, whereas Article 23 makes it the town administrator.
Right.
So Article 23 and 24 accomplish the cost savings part, but it doesn't accomplish strengthening the town administrator. Is that a fair reading?
Yes, that's correct. If you use the statutory procedure, then it's set up so that the Board of Selectmen become the appointing authority. That's by statute. If you do it by special act, we can have the town administrator.
And then one other comment, that at Saturday, there were a lot of very capable lawyers in town, and some of them were here, and they all had different ideas about different words. And over the weekend, I tried to get as many of those as I could, and I sent them to you and asked you whether you've digested all of that and whether you have whether you've made any revisions to what would be a motion under Article 23, and if so, what have you done?
I looked at the comments from Mr. Shea and from Mr. Murphy, and I think there were a few other comments. And some of them, I frankly disagreed with. Others I thought were good points. One of which was there was some redundancy under the powers and duties under Section 3, where I think I said there were two different sections where it said that the town administrator will be the chief administrative official and, will be responsible for, supervising and so on. It was in there twice, so that was a good point. So I consolidated those two to get rid of the redundancy. I put in a provision for an interim town administrator because that was a comment raised by a number of people, although again, that can be put into a bylaw. There were a couple of, typo type things that were corrected. And then there was also a request to put in the Recreation Department as an exception so that they could continue to have control over lands under their jurisdiction. And so that was put in. So those were the major sort of technical changes that I thought, were warranted.
Do you have copies so that we can distribute to the public and to the board?
I think Diane
We
has
have
copies.
copies of that.
And I think we already sent it to the advisory committee.
I don't know if everybody had a chance to read it. It came in at,
Does anybody in the public want to see
5:05.
it? I think Diana's passing out some
What good are you then?
in the back.
What good are you?
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for?
There was a question, I think, there was a comment made, I think, by Ben Williams at Saturday about if we put stuff in the state law, it becomes rigid, so why not do it locally? And I thought I heard your answer was that what's in the state laws, what has to be in the state law, is that right?
Yeah, the things that are covered in here, again, we've taken out everything that can be covered by the bylaw, except for the interim town administrator. So this is really just things that, because there are already state statutes, for example, signing the warrants, there's a state statute that says it's the board of selectmen that have to sign the warrants for payments. So if you want to change that, you can't just do a bylaw, you have to put it in here. So what's in here is what needs to be in the special act. Again, there were a lot of things that were taken out of the original version, which I would certainly recommend be put into a bylaw at some point. But I was asked to trim it down and to try to take out whatever I could. And I just want, if I could, say one thing about the introductory phrase, because this introductory phrase for special legislation always seems to raise questions. The very first paragraph, which talks about submitting this to the legislature, this is actually a paragraph that's recommended by the Senate and House Counsel. They sent out a memo a few years ago saying, you know, how a town meeting warrant article should read when you're asking for special legislation. And what happens is, you know, if this is passed by town meeting, it's sent to your state representative or state senator to file with the state legislature. It goes to the Senate and the House Counsel, and they're gonna review it. And I can tell you, you know, having been through this many times, that, you know, obviously when you get a bunch, you know, more than two lawyers, you can get 3 opinions. So oftentimes they'll come back and say, you know, we don't like the wording in this section, we think it's unclear, you know, this clause, we don't know if it's modifying this clause, so we want you to change it. And if you don't have this introductory sentence that allows the Board of Selectmen to agree to non-substantive changes, then theoretically, the legislature would have to send this back to town meeting to approve that change in that one phrase. So it's, and trust me again when I tell you that the House Counsel and the Senate Counsel are very strict about the changes. They will not ask the Board of Selectmen to agree to any substantive changes. You know, I've had one sent back where they said, you know, there were too many changes here, you have to go back to town meeting. But the reason that introductory is in there so that if there are those kind of changes, the Senate and the House Counsel can send it back to the board and say, look, we want to change this phrase, is that okay? That's, you know, within the, what was the scope of the article, and the Board of Selectmen say yes. So we don't have to go back to town meeting over simple things. So that's all that is. And again, it's the language they suggest.
I don't think you have to worry about us trusting you, by the way.
Well,
I don't think that's an issue. Let me ask you one question, though. I mean, if the town is going to consider this question, wouldn't it make sense to consider the things that have to be changed by legislation and the bylaw changes all at the same time?
Well, again, it depends. If this passes at town meeting, when we know the final phrase or the final form of this, at that point, we've got quite a bit of time while this works its way through the legislature to go back and say, okay, now let's fill in with the bylaws that we need. We already have a town administrator bylaw, which is, you know, fairly general to say the least at the moment. So it's not that it's an emergency. So there's nothing wrong with doing it this way. There's nothing wrong with saying, let's try to get the act passed, let's see what comes out of town meeting, and then let's go drop the bylaws that will complement it. I mean, you know, it can be done either way. I've seen it done both ways.
Okay. Any other questions for Barbara?
Well, just to repeat, so section 3 has to go through the state, through the general court. All of section 3 in this bylaw. None of that can be a local bylaw.
You know, I'm sure I could go through and find a sentence in here that might be able to, but no, I would say probably 90% of it has to go to the state. Because what we're doing is we're determining who's the appointing authority. Right now, under state law, for most of these, the appointing authority is the Board of Selectmen. So we're changing that to the town administrator. I mean, you know, again, there's something, maybe you could find a sentence in here that could, but for the most part, when you're changing appointing authorities, that's special legislation.
I actually had a question that I didn't think of before, and I apologize for this because nobody's talked about it. Should we consider going to a town manager form of government?
Well,
That goes to Dave Collins,
yeah,
if I could, because
that's not my pay grade, as they say.
It just occurred to me, normally, you know, in municipalities, I see that the power of that position is on issues in line with that, appointing authority to things like conservation agents. I've seen that usually in a town manager form of government.
Well-
It gives an extra oomph, I think, and especially if you've got town manager being the finance director, or what, you know, whatever you want to call that position.
I think it depends on the town, George. I've seen it in quite a few towns where it's actually a town administrator. For example, town of Situate, town of Harwich, town of Manchester by the Sea, town of Medway, all the ones that I've worked with. And all of those, the town administrator is the appointing authority, even though they still have appointed boards. For example, Situate still has an elected planning board, but the town planner is appointed by the town administrator and reports to the town administrator. So, you know, there are a lot of towns that are like that.
I gotta keep us focused on
Yeah.
23 here. Any other questions? 23?
just one summation question for her. To the best of your ability, this article does the job technically?
Yes.
Thank you. Could I then call Dave Williams? I know it's not a trial, but
No, it's not a trial, and, you know, we've already been on this for quite some time. Is there something new?
yes, because there was a financial analysis done by one person, and then there was a rebuttal by a second person, we asked
Dave,
Dave
if you can
Williams
keep it to 2 minutes.
to do
I can do it in 30 seconds.
a financial analysis.
I just wanted to say, in a previous position, I was a treasurer collector in the city of Bath, Maine. We had 5 full-time, no part-time, 35 hours a week. So when I looked at what we have here and what some sort of reorganization would do, it looked like we would lose 1 full-time and 1 part-time. And I hate to be talking about this because it'll be everywhere tomorrow. But based on losing 1 full-time and 1 part-time position, you'd be looking at 60 or 65,000. And that was just my quick estimate today. That doesn't include any sort of impacts on workers' comp, FICA expense, OPEB, retirement liabilities, any of that. So Peter had told me it's got to be between 40 and 80,000 as a guesstimate, and it was smack dab in the middle. So I just wanted to pass that on.
So could I have a minute, Mark? Thank you. Yeah, so there's, I guess, a couple of things jump out in this whole process for me. Clearly, there's some cost savings. It's not really, it's a rounding error to the town's budget. I think if you move forward, as Dick was suggesting, on, you know, if the town moves forward on all the DOR and Collins types of recommendations, there's a couple $100,000 within the building to be realized. But, you know, the real cost savings, if you're chasing those, are elsewhere in the budget, as we all know. One of the things, a couple of things have jumped out in this process. One, and I think Barbara helped allay the fears that the selectmen are trying to pull something over here through this whole process. And I don't feel we are. I think we're really trying to effectively do what the recommendations are that make good sense for the town. One of the things that struck me here, and I've come to learn as this process has evolved, is the importance of the term strong. We have a strong police chief. We have a strong fire chief. These mean something. And here we're trying to create a strong town administrator. And it's not just, you know, bolster them up. There are real meanings in municipal government from that word. So it's a very important word. But for me personally, what really is, to me, a lot of it is what it's about, is I go back to this slide, the chain of command, okay? I really struggle with that. I am not, you know, Dick talked about, he really resonated with me when he was talking about a chief financial officer who doesn't have authority over certain individuals doing stuff within his organization. And I come from the for-profit sector. I've served as chief financial officer in addition to other types of roles. So for me, I have a difficult time being responsible for the work of somebody over whom I have no authority and who's not accountable to me. And I don't know how I'm going to struggle with that as time goes on here in this position. It's very difficult for me. Signing various things that I've had nothing to do with, I don't like it. I don't know how long I'll be able to do it. laying that right out there. So this is really, for me, most importantly, an effort to clarify this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Our rules say that we will open it again for public comments. I would ask, of course, if anybody wants to speak, that you please bring something new to the conversation. Okay. Sorry, Grace.
Silence. I have all along felt that this was going in the right direction, but being pushed by the wrong process. It wasn't explained, it wasn't given to people with time to understand. There weren't choices so that you only had one thing in front of you instead of all this ambiguity, all the things that people have complained about. But I actually think that it's the right place to go. I think that this has been really quite a good improvement. I think that a lot of the things that were annoying and ambiguous and fed into a certain level of paranoia that we all share caused us to be even distrustful. So I am struck by Dick Kobayashi's comment about the U.S. Constitution. We did worse than amend the Constitution. We came up with the wrong one altogether first, if you remember, and then we went on and wrote the right one. Ben today asked me what bad things would happen if this passed. And I really didn't think there were bad things that would happen. I didn't think the Board of Selectmen would take advantage of the previous version's ambiguities to do things we didn't want them to. I thought that some people would be annoyed at their loss of authority and resign, and other people would fill in. I also said I didn't think it would pass, but I didn't think anything bad would happen if it did. I think something good would happen if it passed.
Okay. I will take a motion to recommend no action on Article 23.
Moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of no action? All against? Passes 8-1. Okay, on Article 24, I will take a motion to recommend no action on Article 24.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of recommending no action? Passes unanimously. Do you want to discuss 25 and 26?
We did, didn't we?
I was gonna say, did we not cover 25 and 26 through that
Okay, I
discussion with Barbara?
didn't,
Unless you have,
didn't want to run over you.
well, thank you, unless you have reasons, if you'd like to open discussion on them.
Well, we'll vote it and then we'll open discussion and see where we go. We'll take a motion to recommend no action on Article 25.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Of no action, yes. All in favor of no action. Passes unanimously. And I'll take a motion to recommend no action on Article 26.
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of recommending no action on Article 26? And again, passes unanimously. Which brings us to Article 27, which is has to deal with the recall elections. I'm sorry? That would, yeah, we could do that. We had, right, I apologize.
Yeah, we probably should.
Let's do that. Article 35. Is there any further public comment on Article 35? No. I will take a motion to recommend no action on Article 35. Any discussion? All in favor of recommending no action? It's 8, right? All against recommending no action? 1. Passes 8 to 1.
The motion passes.
The motion passes 8 to 1, yes. Okay. Article 27. This article deals with a recall petition. Again, I would ask the board's indulgence to, once we've
Chair.
discussed this one.
I'm sorry. Can, I
Yes.
just had a question, just because I noticed school people sitting here. Were we going to revisit when we held everything? Or, I didn't mean to throw you off. Remember how
We were, it may be polite to move that forward if everybody's okay with it.
It
We
just
can-
dawned on me.
We
Just
can
a
deal with
suggestion.
that, and they don't have to sit through all of this. Thank you. So if everybody's in agreement, why don't we go back and deal with the articles that we postponed while waiting for the town accountant and to get some more information on capital. So I think the first one we need to deal with is Article 3. And since Saturday, there have been some changes to the submitted budgets, 2 changes, so we're now working off financial model 11. Okay, thank you. 3 changes. You just stick with me for a second here, I gotta find them.
That brings us right
Oh, thank you. Okay. So both,
cemetery is
so, hang on a second. So CM&D, Ruth, the ones that change are CM&D payroll union and CM&D CM&D expenses. Okay. So the changes are, Norfolk Agricultural, 92,782. CM&D Payroll Union, 441,154. CM&D Expenses, 332,258. And Veterans Line 543, Veterans Agent Expenses, 7,925. Just so you have the line numbers, Norfolk Agriculture was 316, CM&D was 401, and 543 on Veterans Agent Expenses. So, not hearing any holds, I will take a motion to approve the budgeted line items as appears on Model 11.
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? I just draw your attention to the change in the amount of free cash that's gonna be required. It's gone up slightly to 86,274, but we'll vote that later. So, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay.
Hey, Mark, just a question.
Yes,
Did you just vote on the CM&D piece?
we did.
Did you ask for a comment?
I did.
Sorry, I missed it, I'm just trying to catch up, but is there any chance we could have a quick comment about what I've just learned about with the CM&D cut that's gonna affect
Sure.
Doug Collins, 10 Bearcat Lane, Chair of Sherborn Recreation. It's my understanding that that cut that was proposed basically is a result of an individual that had left CM&D last year. They didn't rehire. They were looking to basically either rehire or use that money for potentially an outsourced mowing capability. Without that resource, basically what that does is turns the mowing of our fields from what typically during the spring especially has been 2 times a week to keep the grass at that basically inch level. We're being told that as a result of this, it'll basically force them to go to 1 time a week. And I believe we're going to have major consequences on safety and other issues related to not having the resources to basically, mow the fields effectively. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, as it looks like it was more of just a shuffling of line items, but it has more effect than just, moving a sum of money around. And although it's $47,000, which I know is a big sum of money, it's still extremely important. We have continually over the years had the resources cut on the land management side, and more of that burden has been put back on the Recreation Commission to actually go out and generate monies to try to pay for things. And it's really, getting to a point, we have a $9,000 budget, so we have nothing in our kitty. We generate our own money, but we're getting to a point where we keep cutting the field resources that the town provides. We don't put any money into the fields as it is. We barely have any equipment to do anything. Now we're gonna cut this. I don't get it. I just don't understand. I'm not sure where the decision came from. I just learned about it today. So I'm not sure who's juggling what or what decisions were made, but learning about it, I think we ought to go against that, that approval. And I know you guys have just voted on it, so I apologize for not having caught it quicker. But I wanted you to be aware that there's a lot more consequences here of approving that line item than you may have understood.
You guys want to comment on that, or?
The 47,000.
No, David met with CM&D director. They worked through the budget.
I mean,
That's what you got.
there's 45,000 coming out of the CM&D budget. That's services, that's somebody not doing something, and you have to move resources. So, at the selectmen's meeting the other night, we talked. I said, you got enough in there for a third to a half of the year for mowing under your current schedule, with no reserves for unanticipated mowings. Ruth and I looked at it today with him, and we might be be coming back next year. So you put it in there now, and he's definitely not gonna come back, but you keep it out, and we're gonna try to make ends meet, and hopefully we won't be back, but when you make a cut of a department, it's gonna be services somewhere.
Okay. All right. So Ruth, on Article 5, on the supplemental, do we need to make any changes there?
You can read it again, because I don't know. There's a couple of
All right. I'm going to reread the supplemental. There's been some, I think, some changes on geography, split.
Yeah, they have to be voted by payroll and expense lines. So a lot of them were combined originally. I've now separated them out into the line items.
But has the total changed?
I had to add the veterans, so yes, that was changed. I don't know what was there on Saturday, I'm sorry, I kinda lost track of what was there.
Okay. So,
It's gone, I think it's gone up about $70,000.
okay, which would be the veterans piece?
So it's running the same as 10A.
Totally?
Yes, 7A was running 7,500 for veterans. I thought it was gonna be higher.
No, that's in the budget. This is the supplemental.
Change the budget for next year.
Okay, Article 5. See if the town will vote to transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum, for the purpose of supplementing various line items of the town's fiscal year 2013 budget, previously voted by the town under Article 3 of the warrant for the 2012 annual town meeting, or to make any other adjustments to the fiscal year 2013 budget that may be necessary, or take any other action related thereto. And those expenses are town clerk expense, $4,790, election and registration payroll, $3,720, election and registration expenses, $5,933, police overtime, $45,000, debt service interest related to an assessor case settlement, $21,786, snow and ice expenses, $90,000, legal, $30,000, employee benefits, $55,000, and veterans, $7,500. Take a,
Mark, could you give us a total? Do you have it?
no, I don't have a total.
Okay.
Is that the 263, 729?
Yeah,
Yeah,
isn't that it?
okay. We're sure?
That's what it shows.
Yes.
Okay. For a total of $263,729. Take a motion to approve Article 5.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
What was the increase in 9,000 for the benefits? What was the $9,000 increase in benefits? What was it?
Oh, that's for the health insurance. Would like to talk, he reevaluated where he is right now for the budget, and he's anticipating being over by 55.
This is the fiscal year 13 budget you're talking about?
Yes.
We had an unusually high enrollment from the projections that were made a year ago, January. And it occurred July 1st when the new enrollments occurred. And it caused a significant increase in the amount of health insurance. We have advised the advisory of that, I think, back June a year ago.
It's too late.
Ruth, and there's no payroll associated with the snow and ice?
As of right now, I'm not seeing it, but some changes might be made between now and town meeting.
Okay. All in favor? Passes unanimously. I believe we voted Article 7.
Yes, unanimous.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Voted.
And we voted Article 8.
Yes.
And so that brings us to Article 9. Ben had requested that we postpone our vote on this article.
Pending hearing from capital budget about, we were on quite a roll there passing stuff, and it suddenly occurred to me that we had not totaled all of this new debt, and wanted to hear about if it was recommended by capital budget that we take on all those things, and what would be the ramifications of so doing.
Right, so I'm Bob Searle, Old Orchard Road, Capital Budget Committee. We do have the numbers now for the request for fiscal 14, which we think are solid, although we are going to need to circle back with all of the proponents to make sure that they're comfortable with it. I also passed out the latest version of that debt service chart that Pete Hoagland put together for us based on those numbers. He wanted me to make sure I mentioned that these are preliminary still, and some of the timing may change once you dig into whether it's 5-year, 10-year, that sort of thing. But what it shows is, given the things that we have already approved and that's on the list, including the region, it puts us over that $2 million debt service for starting fiscal 14 and then fiscal 15 as well. So, you know, we had talked, last year's budget committee had set $2 million as being kind of the notional target. You didn't want to go above that. But given what we've already approved and what we're now talking about for the region, that is all included in here, approved regional, and it gets you to a payment in 2014-15 that's going to be slightly above $2 million. Where we start to get into much more difficulty, this place where it says capital budget plan starts to really skyrocket. Those are some things that are going to be coming up next year as we understand it, and we still need to solidify those numbers. But there's a couple of big ticket items for fiscal 15 that would have this effect as you see this light, the very top capital budget plan.
Mark? We don't have that schedule, but how much of the debt service that larger than $2 million is principal paid out?
All we have is Mount Misery.
Okay, so we don't know. Do you know it, Bob?
Pete, you got, this time you gotta come to the microphone, I'll get in big trouble.
The quick answer is I don't have that broken out for you immediately. One of the reasons is the school one.
The school
I don't
piece,
have a
yeah.
breakdown of that $700,000 or so.
Yeah.
As I can quickly put together the towns for
Well,
it.
we paid down, like this fiscal year, we're looking at about $1 million, right, for the town only,
If you take a look at the budget, which I don't happen to have with me, I don't have it at the
on the book.
microphone with me.
Ruth has it,
It shows the principal payments, so,
yeah. Including the region?
not my budget.
Yeah, so I think yours is about $1 million, and then there's some slug from the region of the total $2 million debt service. So
Yeah.
we're certainly in the $1 million plus range of principal pay down, it sounds like. Or more than half of that $2 million is paying down principal is another way to put it. Thank you. Thanks, Pete.
Does anybody have any further questions? I'd like to move us to a vote on Article 9. And Barbara, maybe you can help me on this. Article 9, it says, to see if the town will vote to approve borrowing authorized by the Dover Sherborn. Do I need to put any kind of a number in here?
No.
Okay. All right, Article 9, to see if the town will vote to approve borrowing authorized by the Dover Sherborn Regional School District Committee for the purpose of paying costs of adding air conditioning to the middle school, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and to determine whether the town's approval of the borrowing shall be conditioned upon the passage of a vote by the town to exempt its share of the principal and interest of such borrowing from the limitations on total taxes imposed by Proposition 2.5, so-called, or alternatively to vote to appropriate by transfer from free cash in the treasury a sum of money for said purposes pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement with the Dover Sherborn Regional School District and the town of Dover to provide funding for such project or take any other action relative thereto. I'll take a motion to approve Article 9.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to approve the borrowing authorized by the Dover Sherborn Regional School District Committee for the purpose of paying the costs of various items of capital equipment and/or improvements, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and to determine whether the town's approval of the borrowing shall be conditioned upon the passage of a vote by the town to exempt its share of the principal and interest of such borrowing from the limitations on total taxes imposed by Proposition 2.5, so-called, or alternatively to vote to appropriate by transfer from free cash in the treasury a sum of money for said purposes pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement with the Dover Sherborn Regional School District and the town of Dover to provide funding for such capital equipment and/or improvements or take any other action relative thereto. So I will take a motion to approve Article 10, or to recommend favorable action on Article 10.
Moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just one question, there's $13,000 worth of stuff on this that's maintenance. Is this stuff bondable
In which, I'm sorry.
in the region, or maybe the region can talk to that? And if it isn't, would you drop it back in the operating budget? You know it's bondable.
According to our bond counsel, Rick Manley, he says everything on that list is bondable. Sorry, Richard Robbins, the Regional School.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay, and then we still need to vote Article 11. So, Ruth, do we know what number we need to vote here, or do we?
That comes from a management fund, and I didn't check to see what's in, I need to know what's in there. I don't have a number for you.
So, how do we vote this?
Say 10,000. If you want to.
10,000 is sufficient? Okay, Article 11, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum to be used pursuant to Chapter 114, Section 15 of the general laws for the improvement or embellishment of the cemeteries throughout the town, the care, preservation, or embellishment of any lot or its appurtenances therein, or take any other action related thereto. So I will take motion to recommend favorable action on Article 11 to be limited to no more than $10,000.
And Mark, it's coming from the enlargement fund. We discussed
Okay, to be transferred? Okay. So I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action to transfer $10,000 from the enlargement fund for the purposes of Article 11.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. All right. I think that catches us up. Am I missing anything? We ready to move on to Article 27? Okay, Article 27 is put forward by the Board of Selectmen, deals with recall. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Is there a proponent presentation?
Okay. No, this is a recall election, put forward by the Board of Selectmen last year, and also the same thing this year. There is a citizens article trying to do the same thing. The way I see it, the key differences between the two articles are this one has, requires 300 people to get something going versus the other one calls for 200. And this one specifies where it calls for a statement of grounds of recall, it gives valid grounds for recall, and the three items A, B, and C there in section 1, compared to the other one that you're going to be asked to consider, which just says a statement of grounds for recall. So this one has been vetted and drafted by town council and can speak more to the particulars, but this allows a means, if I'm a crook, to get rid of me. Where right now, the town does not have a means to get rid of me if I'm a crook. And I'm not, just for the record.
Go ahead and say it, I am not a crook.
I am not a crook.
Susie?
Can I ask a quick question to Peter?
Yes.
Is the Board of Selectmen for this article?
Yes.
Or are they for this article as opposed to the citizens article?
We are,
Draft.
as far, we haven't actually voted on this, we're doing that sort of thing Thursday
Right.
night, but I can safely say, and there's Vice Chair, Mr. Durensis, the question was, Paul, if we're for Article 27, I am as opposed to the citizens article, and I can't speak for Paul.
You know,
'cause we haven't
Paul,
voted on it
my
yet.
question was a little more pointed. Are you for this article totally in a vacuum, or are you for this article as a better alternative to the citizens article?
I think where I'm at is that the cost of having election, I have a town that has a recall provision in it, and they have so many elections and they cost so much money that if we want our money to go towards constant having elections, then you ought to have a recall provision. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money and have that kind of disruption, none of these are particularly good and have never been needed really in the town of Sherborn. So my position on it is if you're going to want to have a recall, why don't we start with the one that the selectmen have offered, see how it does, see if it's ever used, see how often it's used, before you go to something that's really radical and makes it for a wide open town. So, but we don't see a great need for anything.
Thank you.
What he said.
Hi, Susan Tyler, 26 Western Avenue. I had a handout earlier that I passed up there with differences between Article 27 and 36. 27 being the Board of Selectmen's article, which I just would like to note that tonight is the first time the Board of Selectmen have discussed this article in a public meeting. The citizens petition had a timeline. It had to be presented to the town. January 10th, I believe, was the deadline for notice of intent for articles. There's been a long time that the citizens have been on record as to what was being requested. And I think it was a knee-jerk reaction from the Board of Selectmen that once again, just like last year, boom, we're gonna do one. And I would like to question, if I may, the comment was made that some towns have had a recall and it's very expensive. I'd like to know what towns, because I find very few. Middleborough just had one, and that's not a town that you represent as far as I know. So anyway, there's about 6 differences between the 2 articles. The first thing is we made a difference, the citizens, on the article that was presented last year. We raised the first step to 200. Now, we have, as of last year's, the number of registered voters was 2,868. So we say the first step, we need 200. The selectmen say 300. Now, if you go further down the list, you'll see that at the second go-around, so if you first get the affidavit assigned, and you get those certified, those 200 signatures certified by the register, then you gotta go back out and you gotta get 10% of the elected, the registered voters. Well, there's a big flaw in the selectmen's, because right now, you would need 300 the first go-around on the affidavit and 286 on the petition, 10%. So the citizens is up in the ante. Every step of the way, there is a bigger burden for the people that are asking this. And as far as so the first thing is the number of voters, then you get to the reasons for the recall. The selectmen are limiting it to 3. And out of 185 that I have searched out, there were only one other town that does that, and that's Framingham. The majority of the 185 that I have got, reviewed all their records, say it's just a statement of the grounds, which can include the 3 reasons that the selectmen want to limit it to. The other difference is we would be the only town that singles out the town clerk if the recall is against her. The only town out of all 185. The other difference is the days of, once everything is certified, how many days before you must hold the election between. We say 60, they say 64, unless there is an election within 100 days already scheduled. And the only other thing is the citizens are saying that if you are recalled, successfully recalled, you cannot be reappointed to any position in town for 2 years. Most towns, it's anywhere from 1 to 2. Framingham itself is 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie, don't go away.
I'll balance.
Any more comment on this one? Because I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I'm going to also. Yes, please.
Just very quickly, a couple of things that were sort of glossed over that I think are important. The 64 days for the election, that's required by state law. 60 days is not long enough. The election divisions require 64 days, so whichever version of this, you go with, it should be 64 days. And the other difference, in the very last paragraph, I thought that the citizens petition was confusing when they talk about,
Hang on, Barbara, we're gonna talk about the citizens in a second.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were looking for the differences.
So does the 60, I apologize, does the 60 apply to the selectmen's version as well? or-
Selectmen's version has 64 days,
64, okay, good.
and this one has 60 days. I'm just saying that, in my opinion, under state law, that's not long enough.
Okay.
It doesn't meet the minimum.
Just hang on one second.
Okay.
So if everybody's okay, I think we'd just like to also talk about 36 now, and then we can have our discussion and then do our vote. So, you can sit down if you like, really. Do you want to give a presentation on yours, or are you?
I've basically summed it all up. I mean, the steps are very similar to what the selectmen have. It's just, a select board.
Susie, we need you to go to the mic.
There's very few differences between the citizens and the selectmen. The process is the same. Now, as far as the 60 versus 64, so 60 days, between 60 to 90 days, you have to have an election unless there's one already scheduled within 100 days. The selectmen, in their version, Article 27, says 64 days. That's fine. I have no problem with that, but in researching all the ones that have already been approved by the state, which is where we came up with, we took the average throughout the state. We've got one here that, you know, the town of Acton, 25 to 60 days. The town of Barnstable, 45 to 60 days. I mean, it's not 64 to 90, 65 to 90, so, you know, so 60 to 90. Let's see, what was, yeah, Nantucket just says within 70 days. So there was a range. We went with what the majority did, which was a 60 to 90. That certainly is a citizen's petition at the town floor a motion could be made to amend that to match the selectmen. So that was the one difference. The other thing, as far as how many days for the town clerk and the registrar's office to certify, those numbers are exactly the same. The percentages, 21 days after their signatures on the petitioner, we turn in them, come up with the 10%, those numbers are the same. The town clerk shall within 3 days file it back over. Same thing. The register of voters shall within 14 days. The town clerk shall immediately submit the petition with a certificate to the Board of Selectmen within 14 days. Exactly the same as what the selectmen have come up with. So again, the differences are between the selectmen's version and the, which is 27, and the citizens' 36, is the number of voters on the first step, 200 versus 300. The reasons for the recall, the selectmen's Article 27 is singling out the town clerk, and then the difference of the days to election, 60 versus 74, and then the time period until the next appointment, should you be successfully recalled. Those are the difference between the two articles. Other than, I'm sorry, the introductory paragraph that town council mentioned today, earlier, as far as being what the state, the House, and the Senate is liking, as far as introductory.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Just one point on the citizen article. One of the things the Collins report indicated was that we had 18 elected officers. That means you can have 18 different officials being recalled on 18 different recall elections. And these recalls can happen fairly frequently. That is, even if someone survives a recall, then I think it's like a 6-month waiting period, and that could be another effort to recall them. So if you did all the arithmetic over a 3-year term, divide 3 years by 6 months, multiply it times 18, that's the number of elections that could be required to be held within the town of Sherborn over a 3-year period. It's crazy.
What do we have now that's processed for this? We don't have anything.
Right. We have nothing.
Grace?
Unfortunately, I didn't count how many different towns there were. Obviously more than 100, probably closer to 2. Did you count?
It's numbered, on the left. Oh, you don't have that version,
No.
sorry.
Anyway, I don't know. All of these towns have a recall petition, law. Most of them have very general reasons for it, allowing the citizens to express themselves. And I read the papers every day, and I see no pattern of multiple, frequent, excessive recall petitions. Most people vote people into office and are quite content. Every now and then, there is a passionate sense that something is wrong, enough to get, in this case, 200 voters in this town to sign a petition. I think that's quite a lot of people to feel so strongly about it. Obviously, something should be looked into. So I suggest that the citizens' petition is more responsive to the needs of the citizens of this town, and it is not an unusual text. It is actually the most common text all through the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, I think I'd like to,
Can I just clarify one thing, please?
sure.
Hi, I don't want to leave it that, in people's mind that it's just the 200 signatures. You need 200 signatures for the first for the first petition. And then once those are certified, then you need 10%. Once those are certified, the process, both processes here, they go back, and once they're certified and you've got enough signatures, you go to the elected official, they have 5 days to step down. Should they choose not to step down, within a certain period, whether it's 60 to 90 or 64 to 90, an election is held. In the town of Sherborn, we are asking for, which is more stringent than a lot of other towns, we're asking that at least 30% of the registered voters have to show up to the election. So that ups it again. So we've gone 200 to 300, and now we've gone to 30%. And out of the 30%, and a lot of towns don't do this, the citizens are saying that 2/3 have to vote in the affirmative at that election. So there's about 4 different steps. Thank you.
Chuck Yon, Maple Street. Two comments. One, I think if you're going to have, I admire the Progressive Party in Wisconsin and Minnesota, if you're going to have a recall, I think limiting it to 4 very narrow points of felony, it doesn't make sense. I think the protections are in the numbers. And secondly, I'd be interested in knowing how many recalls there have been with, sounds like there are about 200 towns in the Commonwealth that have had recalls. I don't read about them, but then I'm interested if anyone has any actual numbers of how many recalls, if there's this perception of a potential for abuse. Anyone know how many recalls there have been in this Commonwealth?
Susie does.
Just yell it out if you know what number.
Middleborough last year. And it was not successful.
I think if we're going to do a recall petition, I think the citizens petition having wider and broader grounds rather than the 4 narrow ones that are in the selectmen's petition makes much more sense.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to use the same process we used before, maybe just go down I'm gonna bring the conversation up here, just go down the row here.
I get to go first
You get
again?
to go, I can start the other side too, if you like.
No, that's okay. You know, a couple of observations that I think I had last year. I'm not entirely certain why we need a recall provision. And if we are going to do a recall provision, I'm a little troubled with a broad recall provision that basically has unlimited grounds. Because if it's a close election, it could be looked to as a way to oust someone that was elected. I would prefer much more prescribed grounds of malfeasance if we're going to recall a public official.
My feeling is that it's a litigious society as it is, and if we give a broader perspective, it might lend more to people just throwing something out there to see what happens. I don't know what the general laws under this chapter, but it seems to me that they probably would be pretty broad in and of themselves. That would include some things that, you know, we may not know about. I'm probably more inclined to approve something that has some kind of boundaries so that people can't take advantage of things. That's just my perspective.
For those 1.5 of you people who read the insufferably pedantic minority report on this proposal last year, you will recall that the minority opposed these, not in principle, but thought we could address by a modification the concerns that have just been raised. If one goes 10% of the voters, 200, 300 people, you then go roughly another 200, 300 people, second step. One a petition, one. The third step is to have the vote. If 30% of the town does not vote, none of it matters. It was all for naught. The minority suggested that a recall is lovely. Have the 30% threshold up front without a specified set of guidelines, so that addresses those who don't want a limited function. If 30% of the people in this town sign a petition to get rid of somebody because they don't like their haircut, it's a democracy, that's a lot of people. We can have a recall vote. And I think that solves both problems. Put the larger number up front, so that way we don't have a recall, spend the money, and have no recall. If 29% of the people show up, doesn't matter what you did up front, it doesn't count under both proposals. So I would say 30% up front, any reason, it's a democracy.
So if I can ask you, do either of these meet that standard for you?
No.
My concern is basically with the expense of calling even one election. I guess if I were choosing between the two of them, I would choose the one with the more prescribed conditions, but I'm concerned, as Jeff spoke up, we pay for the expense of an election, it doesn't eventually meet the numbers, and now we've spent the money and
To me, it just seems like a matter of housekeeping that to not have a recall provision means that someday you might find yourself in some sort of terrible situation that for which you have no remedy. So I would like something. I thought Jeff made some excellent suggestions. To me, it seems very daunting to have to twice collect hundreds of signatures. And in the citizens, you have to have 2/3 of the vote on that election day. In terms of, frivolous attempts, it seems like for somebody to have to, try to organize all these petition drives and then be confident that they're going to get 2/3 of the voters who do show up. I don't know that many people that have that much time to devote to something that would, be tilting at windmills. So I do think we need something. I think I would have a slight preference for the citizens petition. It has a higher hurdle on the back end. It might be wise to have just a single hurdle on the front end, as Jeff suggested. I think I would prefer having it open-ended as to reasons. They have to be stated, and really, I think we can trust the voters to, not sign bogus petitions and to not be unreasonable in how they vote.
Sorry to ask a question of Barbara. Is there a state law covering recalls?
No.
Oh, so the town is on its own?
Well, you're on your own, within the election laws. And again, as I mentioned, there are some requirements. The town clerk has to take certain steps, and that's why when I called the elections division, they said you need to give her at least 64 days for the election. You have to be, because you have to have voter registration and so on. But basically, you're on your own except for those election laws, yes.
Well,
But there's no way to recall somebody if we don't pass something.
There is no state recall provision.
okay. No, I'd favor the citizens' petition just because it's a little more open.
So I'm trying to remember from last year, I recall that there were, however many, we had 180 towns that had a recall petition roughly? But there were, that's roughly a little less than half the state number of towns? Is it a little more than half? So I don't know, ballpark, half the towns do, half the towns don't. Small town, I guess in the principle of, I'd only pass a rule if I thought you really need it. There was a demonstrable need. Doesn't seem like there really is. You know, it just seems like we're a town that probably is unlikely to do things that way. To the selectmen's petition, I mean, it requires conviction. I mean, conviction is like, you're going to trial. I mean, you know, convictions are strong, and it takes a long time. And so you watch people in public life, they get charged, they usually step down. I mean, that seems to be the pattern of people. So, I mean, just looking at this whole thing, it seems like tough to write, tough to get it right, and I think probably we can live without it.
Yeah, I pretty much say the same thing. I mean, you've heard me say this before, never mistake activity for achievement, and this is just needless activity, both of the provisions. You know, this is Sherborn, it's not a banana republic, and I served with Paul Durensis, and you know, whatever you want to say about him, one thing he is not is a crook, and I don't think we have to worry about any crooks you come in. I don't know about you. I don't know about you, but I don't think I can attest. Well, actually, I'm for this.
Well, I've served with Peter, and he's not a crook.
Well,
I would urge the committee, you know, no action on both.
Yeah, I don't think we have any crooks here, and I think this is solving a problem that we don't really have. So I'm going to take a motion to recommend, let me get my numbers straight, to recommend no action on Article 27.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can I just ask,
Yes.
the general laws on the chapter 268A cover everything you'd ever think of, or maybe I'm wrong, but there's a lot of pieces in there that everybody's worried about. I mean, the list is pretty extensive, so, you know, outside of something obscure, it covers, I would say, probably 95% of whatever anybody's looking for to put somebody for recall. It just is, it's not as exclusive as people think, because everything under this chapter is pretty extensive here.
Well, if I may, it would not cover what you might call the loss of faith of the electorate. You know, just,
That's it.
you know, you just can't stand having some person in office anymore. This is the way to deal with it.
Well, I'd point out that we reached that point almost with every president of the United States at some point, but then they always seem to get bounced back and get reelected by election day. So if we
But we also have the power to impeach them, so. They,
I think 2 years ago, Obama's approval rate was down where a majority of people didn't want him in office. Does that mean we shouldn't have Obama as president of the United States under that analysis?
Anything else? All in favor of recommending no action on Article 27? 4, 5, 6, 7? Vicky, you're 8.
It's a late.
9, unanimous, thank you. And then Article 36. I will also take a motion to recommend no action on Article 36. Further discussion? All in favor? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All against? 8 passes 8 to 1 to recommend no action. Okay. 26, 27, 28. Article 28, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Assessors to undertake a revaluation of the town's real and personal property for the purpose of receiving recertification approval by the Department of Revenue, to employ experts to assist them in such a revaluation and to enter into service contracts on behalf of the town with such experts, and to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds. And we know what that number is, don't we? Ruth? We don't have that number yet?
I'd point out this is a necessary article.
This is boilerplate. Sum of money, and if so, what sum to cover any costs associated with the revaluation or take any other action related thereto?
My recollection is it's in the 20,000 range.
Okay. I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 28.
Move.
Second.
Further discussion?
Can you just explain to us the purpose of the article? Whoever,
Rick, can you help us out, or Barbara? The question is, what's the purpose of the article?
The town is required to revalue the property every 3 years. I believe this is your 3-year reval year.
But you're not appropriating
Well,
it
taxes
to
don't
the
go
operating
up.
budget. So you're funding it through this means. And it's 12 to 20 grand.
so we're funding reassessing all the property, basically?
I thought it was in the,
But it's not an operating budget, unlike, you know,
I
the
thought it was,
accountant's
actually.
report is in the operating budget. Or an OPEB valuation is in the operating budget, but you're not required to do, well, I guess you're probably not required to do an annual audit except by virtue of the fact that the banks require. This is a state requirement. I'm speaking like a lawyer here.
I guess we're required to do it, this just funds it.
this is payroll.
Okay, more taxes.
But that's paid out of the general fund, right, Ruth?
Yeah, that
It just, it shows, but it's below the line. It's not in the operating budget, it's not in the tax rate,
It's an article funded by free cash.
free cash. But you don't know the amount.
I didn't realize that we didn't have it, sorry.
The question is our free cash usage going up by?
You have an $87,000 usage of free cash in budget 11. Is that going to go up by $20,000?
But whatever, yeah, not.
By whatever this is, 15,000, whatever it is.
So it's not in,
I don't have it, I
It's not included
didn't
right now.
realize it wasn't.
But that's a 14 event, yes?
It's a, I'm sorry.
Fiscal 14 event?
Yes,
So would it affect your little model box for free cash even if you knew it?
yes,
Yes, okay.
but it doesn't affect the budget.
Substantially.
The budget, it doesn't affect the budget deficit.
Correct.
You don't add 20,000 to the 89. It comes out of, it's a usage of free cash.
We're using free cash for several things, one of which is the deficit, and that will not change.
Okay.
right, that doesn't change.
That's just where you put it.
Right, you can follow that? George?
Right.
Can you explain to George better?
I'm sorry, I can't. What is the question?
He's befuddled.
I'm befuddling myself out. I didn't follow that. I mean, I didn't want to pretend to.
87,000
Yeah.
is a budget usage of free cash. This is going to use free cash, but it won't come on the budget. Okay. It won't be budget used, so to speak.
All right. Well, this is pretty much straightforward. We got to do it, right? We'll have a number by town meeting.
Oh, yes.
So I'd recommend, again, that we vote favorable action on it,
Still going to use free cash.
okay? And I think it's been moved and seconded. So all in favor? Passes unanimously. All right, Article 29, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum for the purpose of increasing the stabilization fund or take any other action related thereto.
This is to take some free cash and put into the general stabilization fund, which is not the OPEB stabilization fund. This is sort of the real rainy day college savings, whatever analogy you want to think about it for. The reason I'm interested in this in particular is in the draft policy or guidelines for the town's financial reserves, that right now we didn't pass those or anything, but we did want to maybe keep an eye on them as we're going through this process to see what effect that might have had. One of the recommendations that we get from the DOR and a number of other sources is about the minimum reserves we should keep, and that amount is 5% of the omnibus budget. The budget is $25 million approximately this year, so 5% would be $1.25 million. That 5% would be broken up into two pieces. One would be 2% for the general stabilization, and the other is 3% for free cash. We'll be talking about free cash more later, I suspect, or as the budget season progresses. But right now, we have in the general stabilization fund,
421.
421, 2% of 25 million would be 500,000. So my recommendation would be that we put at least 79,000 in. This happens to be a good year for free cash, so it's not a strain. We will be able to get our general stabilization up to the minimum recommended level, and at the same time, I believe, keep our free cash also above the minimum recommended level. So this would all be consistent with our guidelines and the draft guidelines that we're still considering. So I'd certainly be willing to hear arguments for a larger sum, but I suggest that would be the minimum that's prudent. The 79,000. Yes.
A quick question. When you're, when you're doing your percentages and you're talking about free cash and you're talking about stabilization fund, you're excluding any amounts which are 400 grand going to 500 in the OPEB stabilization.
That's right.
In your reserve percentages that you
That's right.
are using for guidelines.
The OPEB stabilization is for a very specific, totally separate purpose.
I just think you should make that clear, that's all.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Although we're not prevented from tapping into that.
That's
and
right.
using it for whatever we
The
want.
OPEBs
The
or
OPEB.
The OPEB.
I mean, morally we are, but
That's right.
technically we're not.
you know, we're being
And-
kind
and
of
just to-
weaselly by putting it there rather than in a real trust fund.
And just to clarify, we're moving, it's geography of financial reserves, but to get at either of those stabilizations, you require 2/3 vote at town meeting to pull money out if and when you need to. Including if you were to fund the OPEB trust fund out of the OPEB stabilization fund, you would have to get 2/3 vote at town meeting to do that.
Right.
So I have a question, I think it's for Ruth. What's the difference? So let's say we have some amount of we freeze the budget, we've got some amount of free cash. What's the difference if we were to just leave it there or take a chunk of $80,000 and put it in stabilization? Neither one's being, quote, really spent, one's being moved into stabilization. What's the difference to the town?
For the town.
When they add, once you moved it, okay, out of free cash into a stabilization fund, it's no longer available to be spent as free cash. When it's added to a stabilization fund, when the banks look at the total amount of funds available, that's part of the stabilization money is counted as part of the total, but is no longer available as free cash.
So to pull money out of stabilization to spend it on something, what does it take?
That's a
2/3 vote.
two-thirds vote,
So it's tying our hands not to spend the money?
yes,
And free cash is just a majority.
yes.
So that's, essentially, that's the difference.
Yeah.
It's a majority vote as opposed to a 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
Plus a psychological difference.
Yeah, it's harder, psychological area.
And do we get any bonus points with the rating agencies for whether or not it's in free cash or in stabilization? Might be a question for,
About the same. Part of our reserves.
Now, is the process, Mark, that we have to put a number in the motion?
not if we vote no action.
Yeah.
And I think the town would
Assuming
be
there's a
asking
vote
us
for the
to
article.
advise them on what number to put in there.
What's the downside to allocating money to stabilization?
It'll be just slightly harder to get access to it. It's, I don't know a good analogy, it's like checking versus savings, or checking versus, putting the money in a CD. Yes, you could cash in the CD, but you pay a penalty. Here it's just this kind of moral dissuasion caused by the 2/3 vote.
There is an advantage. There is an advantage to having money in stabilization because it shows on the balance sheet. It's right there. The free cash number, you get certified, it gets spent, it's allocated. You have to hunt for it. But it's when it's right there, anybody looking, whether it's borrowing money, whether it's being rated, whether it's you're dealing with a vendor who wants to see how solvent you are, it's there. It's a number. It's a good number.
I just wonder how you can determine the number that you're gonna put in here if your more critical number is the free cash reserve balance you're going to try to maintain, of say 3% is, let's say that for purposes of discussion is where you wanna get to. That then restricts what you can use to pay for any of the capital items that you've approved, but you haven't determined which ones you're gonna pay out of free cash, some of which you might choose to do. So if you're, it seems to me you need to think about that before you decide what you put into the stabilization. And I agree with Ben's approach to try to get it so that you've got 2% in there, but I'd feel better about funding certain items out of free cash, especially since we've seen, geez, the supplementals change in 2 days here by 30 beans. So I'd feel like in my back pocket, I still have the OPEB stabilization. You see what I'm saying? To make me feel comfortable about stabilization reserves. And I think the auditors finally changed the way they're reporting. They had buried the OPEB stabilization in the financial draft that they were doing, and they are now not burying the fact that we have OPEB stabilization. It's another type of stabilization. It's not part of the general fund, though, unrestricted, but it's at least not buried in the report that investors and bond agencies would see. So anyway, I just, suggest thinking a little bit about that, whether you have to have that number pegged tonight, unless you have a reasonable sense. I know Ruth has 125 as free cash to articles, but that's just a placeholder. In our last model that you looked at Saturday, we had 0 in that line item. So, here, enough said.
No, good comments.
That's because somebody had suggested we take an earlier big number and make it 0, but I won't mention any names.
Can't we pass this and have the amount subject to the motion?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to, when we write our report, that we want to put a number in there. So I don't know when we would decide that.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that?
Yes.
The Board of Selectmen has to determine whether or not there'll be any overrides, and if so, what overrides. And we have a timeline. The town clerk will tell you it has to be done 35 days before the election. So it's on our agenda for this Thursday. That means we need to know what you're funding with free cash and what you want us to borrow, because we're going to follow your lead as we have in the past. So you need to, and I'm sorry to put pressure on you, but the timelines require us to put some pressure on you. You need to make some decisions about what you are going to do with free cash with regard to the items for capital and some of those other items, so that we know what to put on the ballot as being borrowed debt exclusion. And we need to know by Thursday.
I don't think at this point we're intending to finance anything out of free cash.
Okay, that's the answer.
Well, there were two.
The model had it in the free cash for some of the items.
Right, but not in the one you did.
No, but that's because it was not determined which items. So
Right.
they
I don't
had to
see any,
select an item.
I mean, I don't see
Well,
any
you had a
reason to.
$5,500 item or something, that sort of, so it's your call.
Yeah.
Well, Ruth can speak to this, but I
That was,
believe
that's just to that point, the $5,500 item came off the regional budget, and that was the question I asked, could they bond it? And their answer was, it was bondable. I think the
No, I think we're talking two different
Oh, this is-
$5,500.
if I may,
Talking about survey.
Survey? Oh, yeah, you're
on
right,
Article
you're right.
8, the town accountant has 2 items marked as being, suitably funded by free cash. One is the, that solar crosswalk project, and the other is the engineering work on Woodland. And I think both of those were because the town treasurer had recommended that those would be least suitable for bonding. Perhaps he would like to speak to that? I don't think I'm making up facts, but maybe I am.
The only one that I recall with the $5,500 being a small item suggested that we do that with free cash.
Okay.
Otherwise,
there was
we'll
one-
we'll pay it off with other funds just to get rid of it.
There was one other too, we had to do the 6,000 with free cash for the communications tower. Remember, they had to get that thing mounted right away? There's 110,000 for the communication tower, and they had to pay $6,000 to mount an antenna before that antenna went up. Otherwise, it was gonna cost us multiples.
Right.
Chief, isn't that right? And it was, your estimate was 6,000. That we had to spend out of free cash. So. I mean, it's
Okay,
not
so we have the
much.
6,000, we definitely.
That was the estimate, was 6,000.
We've got 5,500, probably.
Yeah, Mark, and you have the solar thing, that's what, 10 grand?
1075.
Why can't that be,
We can,
Yeah.
it's a question of, do you have a threshold above which you'd finance and below which you'd use free cash for? And it sounds like you don't. Or anything
And
you
for my,
can finance.
sorry, for my clarification, Pete, you have no trouble with the engineering work on Woodland being bonded, okay?
The law states we can do it, we can borrow it for 5 years, but you can't vote for the project at the same time, okay? You can do the engineering study, vote for it, and borrow, and then do the project.
okay. So, do you want to recommend a number here?
Or stabilization,
Yeah,
79,000,
to get us to 2%.
right.
All right. I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate 79,000, or I should say, will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds $79,000 for the purpose of increasing the stabilization fund or take any other action related thereto.
Moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Article 30, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum, to be deposited into the town's other post-employment benefits OPEB stabilization fund, or take any other action related thereto. And I've been advised by the town accountant that we should vote no action on this because we are funding it through the budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just follow up, not to question you, but, so the 100 grand that's being appropriated automatically goes in there because it's being appropriated, as opposed to the way those would be the funds that would allow it to go in there, so that, I think you need and she's gone, a little I'm not sure you're right, is what I'm saying.
I had a discussion with Pete this morning about this, because I wasn't sure either, but if it's in the budget, 100,000,
How can it go into that OPEB stabilization? Just automatically goes?
As we talked about it, probably in the omnibus budget, it would be noted that that would be for the OPEB, right?
yes.
I presume it could just be done as a transfer.
Okay. And they don't have to do anything under this article then for that, is what you're saying?
What I would still have to defer to the town council, because I don't have a ruling on that.
What's the downside if we do vote this one and put a number in it?
If you vote this one from available funds, the available funds aren't available right now. So you would have to vote it for free cash.
By voting for it through the budget, you're paying for it out of the tax revenues from next year.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's when it goes in. Otherwise, they'd be voting for free cash this year to go into the stabilization as of town meeting?
Right.
Okay.
The, by footnoting it, the intent, you know, on the omnibus budget footnote would state that the intent of this budget would be to move the money.
So next year, would they probably have to vote favorably to do the 100,000 for what was appropriated during fiscal 14?
That would be one of the ways to do it.
Got it. Makes sense.
I'll just note, it is possible for us to vote more for OPEB stabilization, but I'm willing to pass on that. I think it's an improvement to have it come out of the, or be part of the budget rather than an afterthought. So.
Paul?
Just a word why you shouldn't do more. As you know, the Patrick Murray administration has filed legislation. The effect of that legislation would cut Sherborn's OPEB number by 1/3, from about 11 million down to less than 8 in one fell swoop. Those of us at the Mass Municipal Association are working to make that even a better reduction. So your OPEB number is in flux, and between now and next year, I hope to see a significant drop in Sherborn's OPEB number, as will be the OPEB numbers for everyone for all cities and towns.
He wasn't trying to silence you, Paul.
Okay. I'll take a motion to recommend no action on Article 30.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of recommending no action? Passes unanimously. All right, Ruth, what's our free cash number?
On the front is $86,274.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that,
We
please?
should round it. $86,274.
Okay, Article 31. To see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash in the treasury $87,000 to meet the appropriations for the ensuing fiscal year and authorize the assessors to use said sum in fixing the tax rate or take any other action related thereto. I will take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 31, $87,000.
Moved.
Quick discussion?
Yes.
So that number will change by the time we get to town meeting, and you'll revote the number. Is that how that works?
If it does change.
If it does, and
Yeah.
changes
Vote
it
it.
will.
Just under discussion, I want to thank you for being willing to apply free cash. I know we had articulated a goal not to do this, but this is a pretty small number compared to other years, and we really don't want to do an operating override. Thank you.
Well, I think.
Hasn't passed yet.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, from my perspective, I think this shows a good progress in terms of our use of free cash. It's way down from a couple years ago and down, I think, substantially from last year even. So I think it's very encouraging. So,
If you want a note from Bobby Buzzkill here, I'm happy to provide some
Have
perspective.
at it.
I was hoping you would cut me off.
Full of mic.
2 minutes.
Dave?
I do think it's important. Yes, I do think this is a very positive accomplishment, but we need to keep in mind some footnotes going into next year, is that we had several very lucky items happen. We had a very large overlay surplus release this year. That helped out quite a bit. We had a positive surprise on free cash, which made it much more comfortable for us to consider doing these other things. But, you know, I'm already making predictions about guidance for next year, and I won't share them now. You know, some of the other good things that happened were Selectman Caruso did some, you know, sharpened his pencil and went through the budgets and found some areas where we could be a little more aggressive or liberal or whatever you want to call it, you know, and still be prudent. But some of those are, you know, new revenues that will be recurring, and others are not. So they're kind of a one-time thing, and so we need to, I think, not get carried away and continue to be vigilant on keeping spending under control and so forth.
If I could add, well, it was the town's sharpening the pencil, but one of the key things in this budget that worked in the town's favor was the out-of-district sped numbers went down significantly, and that's a number that can fluctuate quite rapidly one way or the other. And that number was used for the first time, in my experience, as an offset to the Pine Hill regular budget. And that establishes a precedent that puts the Pine Hill regular budget subject to some risk going forward to the extent that number fluctuates up and down. So just eyes wide open on that one.
And then my comment would be, you are always going to have one-timers. I mean, I stood up at town meeting last year and I said we got a one-timer from the ratio in the schools.
Right.
That went against us this year. We had a one-timer from snow and ice. That went against us this year. We had a one-timer from health benefits. That went against us this year. So, you know, part of it's just a fact of life. You're going to have those kinds of moving parts. So, I think it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now I can say it.
Article 32. I think we can go ahead and vote no action on this one. Recommend no action on Article 32.
Yeah, I can represent on behalf of the citizens who have produced this. They were content not to go forward with this based on the fact that we had an article that the Board of Selectmen put in. You recommended favorable action on that alternative article. They were here for that session. I don't see them here tonight, but they were quite content with going forward with the moratorium, so they didn't see a need for this.
Are there any other comments on 32 before we vote it? Take a motion to recommend no action on Article 32.
Moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Recommending no action? Passes unanimously. Article 33, a petition to see if the town will vote to adopt Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 38A, to provide for the authority of the collector of taxes under the title of town collector to collect any funds due the town, not limited just to taxes. Oh, there you are. Sorry.
If you don't mind, I'm going to sit. It's been a grueling couple of days. Besides, I like to take Peter's microphone away. So,
I thought you liked to sit near me.
As you all know, the title tax collector only allows me to collect taxes and related funds. And as far back as Dan Keyes, it was requested that I start taking some of the other payments that are made to the town. And then the DOR report came out and they talked about centralizing collections. So I talked to Zach Blake, and doing this way by vote of town meeting gives us the most wiggle room in doing this. we can phase in what we want to do. We can try it. If we don't like it, we can throw it out. Whereas if we were to go by carving it into a bylaw or something like that, it makes it a little tougher to back out. So he suggested that we do some of this and then later perhaps put into a bylaw what funds would come through the collector's office. And I've already had some good time, FaceTime with our town administrator. I will be depending heavily upon him to help me choose which funds we're going to start with. He'd like to get some of them out of his office to start with, I think. So, and we have to set up a process that's not going to be a big inconvenience to the residents. And hopefully we can do a lot of this online so people can get their receipts right at home and won't have to make multiple stops for things. So that's the purpose of this.
Is there any anticipated increase in expense to do this?
Well, because hopefully we're going to start off somewhat slowly, and because, you know, there shouldn't be an increase for the few things that we may start right off with. I'm hoping that at some point in time, we will invest in a kiosk in Town Hall so that people who come down can put their information in, get their receipt out, and not have to visit multiple offices to do their business. But I don't see that in this fiscal year. I did have an epiphany today because I spent some time on the phone with Newbury, one of the places Michael had referred to, and I suddenly realized that this savings thing is not about how you structure, but about implementing the technology and all of that, and we can move in those directions without restructuring our government. It's a matter of what we're willing to invest in as far as changing our technology and paying for outsourcing and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping that through the use of technology, this is not going to be a pain in the neck for our residents, and it'll be a smooth transition to eventually bringing more and more funds through the collector's office.
Could Nancy share my mic with me?
It's not
Thanks,
right over the
Nancy.
microphone.
So if Nancy could just explain why she's doing this as a citizen versus as the tax collector would be helpful. I know you explained it to me. That's part one. And part two is why she's dealing with DOR recommendations. And earlier we had a whole bunch of discussions about DOR recommendations, and we decided to go slowly. Why this one would not fall under that sort of mindset would be helpful for my favorite tax collector.
Thank you, Peter. Well, actually, we've been doing quite a few things that are in that DOR report. They just aren't all things that are visible to the public or to you, as Pete and I have been working on implementing some of the suggestions that made perfect sense. And although I was not looking for more work, this recommendation was one that was completely understandable. And as I said, Dan Keyes had asked if I would be open to doing this when he was here. Then when Jim Purcell was here, he asked again if I would be open to this, and I said that I would, and he was going to put it on the fall town meeting. And in fact, Mr. Dorenzis pulled it off the list and wanted to see what was going to happen with the job. And to be perfectly honest with you, I did it as a citizen's petition because I thought it was important to have the time to phase this in, regardless of what happened with the other articles. I'm hoping, of course, those articles go down in a blaze of flames. But if they don't...
They kind of went down a little smoky tonight.
But even if they don't, this is, I mean, you can't push a button and have all of this happen. And so I'm hoping that we can take advantage of the fact that we're doing it this way and phase things in slowly, take our time, and get used to what, so that, you know, down the road, if we change how we do things, we'll have some of these things in place and it won't all be culture shock.
Paul?
My advice would be to hold off on this article It's not that it's a bad idea, but it's that the Board of Selectmen and our town administrator and so on have got to look at the whole issue of what, the tax collector, how it relates to the other functions in the office, how everything would work, and what, if anything, to come back with for next year, how to structure it so that you would all have something that you can support. It's all part of the same package, part of the same issue, which is how do we handle our financial operations going forward. It seems to me that ought to be done fairly systematically and fairly comprehensively. Give us a chance to regroup after these last votes, figure out what, if anything, the board is going to do. We have hoping and want to work cooperatively with Nancy and with Pete to find a way to develop reforms that would allow us to save money and to streamline the offices, and protect everybody, and so on. We want to continue to work on that. So I would say given your prior votes, I would say hold up on everything, let us work, see what we can come back with.
So I have a question. So the town, you would go, the collector of taxes would go to all the other groups who collect monies and then determine what they can and can't take versus what's already in place?
Actually, I would not, and that was one reason that I would want to do it this way, and why I would work closely with the town administrator, who, because most of the money that doesn't come to my office now comes through departments that would be under him anyway. And as I said, we have already done some talking about where he would like to start and what he would like to see. My reluctance to putting it off another year is, if you don't change my title, I can't do anything except what I'm doing as far as collecting. And it might be nice to put a trial balloon out. One of the things that has been mentioned that's been a real pain in the neck in the selectman's office right along is having to collect the farm pond sticker money. So that was a fairly logical place that David talked about, perhaps we would start. It doesn't mean we have to take everything from everybody because we're doing it this way. If it were the other way, where it went by bylaw, then all the money would have to come through, and we just wouldn't be set up for that. This way we can phase in, we can start doing something with the farm pond, or even something smaller, and test it and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we then have the flexibility to say, okay, we don't like this, and we're going to do it.
So this is something that gives you the authority to collect the money. And the decision of what monies you actually would collect would rest with the town administrator?
That's what I would prefer, because I'm not going to go to a department and say, I'm having your money.
But as you envision it, it would be, he decides it's sufficient for you to get the dog tag money or the farm pond money or whatever it's going to be. You would agree with him with that, and then for that year you would do it.
And we would work out a process, what would make sense in a process.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's misreading the law. If you adopt this law, she is the collector of taxes. She is the collector, right from the word go.
That's not what Zach at the DOR told me. He said, this gives me the flexibility to...
It's what the statute says.
He says different towns have used it differently.
Can you delegate?
Delegate?
Can you delegate the, because it says it gives you the authority, but can you delegate that authority back to a department?
I think well, one thing you can do if you don't want anything but taxes collected is you can change the name back to tax collector. If you move forward with any of the things, any of the other articles that change the job, that automatically changes the title to collector. So you sort of have to sort out what you want to do going down the road. But this would be a chance for us to test the waters, because Zach told me that every attorney at the DOR has a different opinion and about this kind of thing, and that this, in his opinion, is the most flexible way to do this. And many towns have done it where they do not have everything fall under the collector, even though they're a collector. So I've talked to some of the towns, and I find that is true. And unless somebody pushes it to try to bring a court case or something, there should not be an issue. Nobody cares.
I suggest you talk to Barbara, town council, about what this means and what the implications are.
And I have a question. Can I ask one quick question,
Yes, go
Mark?
ahead.
Would this be, I don't know why I'm all loud all of a sudden. Would this be a permanent, because it's not changing on bylaw. So if we voted to adopt this, would it be a permanent change, or we'd have to adopt this yearly, or we forever have adopted until we change it?
I think
that section of the laws.
I think it's adopted until you change it. It's not a bylaw, but it's adopting a statute that's already in place.
Can you summarize the statute? Because that's the crux of it all. I mean, Paul's saying it does something. I don't know what chapter 41, section 38A does, but that's what you're voting on. Adopting that forevermore until changed.
It gives, it allows a town to change, it allows the tax collector under the title of town collector to collect all funds of the town.
It's a
And
paragraph.
Mark?
You can have it.
How long is it? No?
No, I'm pretty sure.
I found the statute.
Yeah, it's right here.
Go ahead.
I got it. You want to read it? You want me to read it, really?
How long is it?
A paragraph.
Okay,
A
go.
city or city or town may by ordinance, bylaw, or vote, notwithstanding any other provision of the law, general or special, provide that the collector of taxes shall collect under the title of city or town collector all accounts due the city or town, and may in like manner define his powers and duties in relation to the collection of such accounts by no such ordinance, bylaw, or vote, heretofore or hereafter passed, shall limit such collector in the exercise of the remedies hereinafter conferred. Who writes this? Such a collector shall in the collection of such accounts have all the remedies provided by sections 35, 36, 39, and chapter 60 for the collection of taxes on personal estate. You really want me to keep going?
No.
It's only a couple of sentences.
Right,
Yeah, there's shalls, I agree.
I'm gonna make it here is, I mean, I could tell you what this means, because I deal with it all the time, but you've got a town council, and she can explain what the implications are, and I would respectfully suggest they are different from what's being told to you here. Before you vote to take action on an article, you really ought to understand its implications. I would suggest you ask Barbara to give you an opinion as to what that means.
It does say shall.
What do you see as the, if I might ask, the potential negative of doing this?
Because she's gonna be required to collect everything. That's gonna be her responsibility. We're not set up for that yet. That really needs to be part of taking a total look at how our money flows and where does it go and how does it operate. So I'm suggesting to you that these things ought to all go together and move forward together, not being done in a vacuum that has us now undertaking work that we're not ready to do, and you're not giving requisite authority in your prior votes to fully implement in a meaningful way.
I will say in implementation, that is not the way it is done around the state. The collectors do not collect every fund that comes to the town in all the towns. I have had conversations with them. I wanted to find out myself if there was any way to pick and choose. And this was the only way, Zach said, that we could pick and choose.
But would you collect the farm pond sticker money?
The money would be paid through the tax office, hopefully online mostly, and then they would take their receipt to the selectman's office and pick up their sticker.
Okay, so you would be selling them out of the tax collector's office?
I would be taking the money for them. They would still be administered through the selectman's office.
And we have hours that run late to accommodate people and sell these at times that are convenient to the public, and the tax collector's office isn't open the same number of hours, so are we gonna then expand the number of hours and increase the budget and hire additional people?
You limit the hours that you sell stickers. And hopefully people will be able to do this 24 hours a day online.
Okay. We do. I guess I'm sympathetic to Paul's point that we want to try and roll this all together. So I'll take a motion to vote no action on Article 33. Been moved. Do we have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor of voting, recommending no action on Article 33? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? Passes 6-3. Okay. Article 34. An article to void the Sherborn Wetlands Protection Laws and Regulations and to substitute the State Wetlands Protection Act and Regulations, MGL 131, Section 4316 MR10. I will take a motion to recommend no action on Article 34.
Move.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the warrant. We're not, I mean, I think we're done in terms of the warrant. I think before we adjourn though, Mary, do you want to talk about the logistics of putting together our report?
Yes, for the people who were, I'll just review it for the people who were here last year. I'll be putting,
Sorry, could we have some quiet?
I'll be putting together the final report to the town that I'll give to Jeannie. Each of you, you've already received your assignments for writing up your, so, I would say, what, a week from today? Get your write-ups to me for first go-around, and then we'll, to me personally, yeah. And if you can just cut the section of the, when do you want to go to the printer, Jeannie?
I think it has to be in the households 10 days before town
Right.
meeting.
Yeah.
So that would be the, what would that be, the 24th?
10 calendar days or 10?
10 calendar days. So
So-
the 24th. So I'm
yeah.
thinking 10 days to get it printed.
Yeah, so that's,
14th.
14th, so that'll be good. That'll give us a little extra,
All right,
a little
well,
extra
wait a
time
minute.
this year for the other. So, yes, if you
Can I get
use, if you use last year's report as a template, some of it is just boilerplate for, you know, if you happen to get one of those articles.
Mary, the 14th is a Sunday, the 15th is a holiday.
Okay,
So if I do this, if I have it the 16th, can I get back to you tomorrow? I'll call the printer tomorrow.
yeah.
I'll call David and just see again. I think last year he gave us a week, a turnaround.
Right, I mean, that's fine. I think a week from today, for them to give me
Okay.
theirs is,
Great.
is good. I mean, that's April 1st, so
Okay.
that, I think that should work.
All right.
Okay.
Is there any convention for what we're gonna do, like,
Wait a
minority
minute,
positions on?
today is Tuesday. How about make it Monday? That'll give you the weekend and then,
There wasn't a lot that
Busy
was
weekend.
really
I think the only thing
contested.
that
Yeah.
comes close, if I recall, is the one we just did. Was there anything else that was even close?
I don't think so. I think 8-1 was the last.
minority reports, yeah. I mean, I guess anybody who wants, who
We
voted
just
in
say
the
anybody who voted in the
minority,
minority who wants to
write
provide a
one.
minority report.
I'm
can
good
provide
with
it.
that.
That's what we
Yeah,
did
although
last
I would ask you if you were the only one. I mean, I don't intend, for instance, to write a minority report on,
I know, someone see us
you know,
strongly. Yeah, but there's no
Woodland
there's-
Road.
you know, if you're the only one, I would ask you to refrain unless you feel very, very strongly about it. But I don't think one rises to the level of a minority, frankly.
Unless they had a really brilliant position. rest of us dummies didn't accept.
It's part of being on a 9-member committee, sometimes you gotta accept that.
So, yeah, so
You
I
good?
mean, I'm good with, let's make it Monday though instead of Tuesday, if nobody objects.
A week from Monday?
Week from Monday, week
No,
from
week from-
yesterday.
Fine.
Okay. Good. In that case, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mark,
Wait,
just
hang on one second, Paul.
I just want to confirm that we are doing override, debt exclusion overrides for Article 8, Article 9, and Article 10. Have we got them all, or have we left
Yes.
any out?
I don't think so.
It's all items in eight?
Is, yes.
Yeah, they all went,
Well, except for portions of it, right?
and they will vote,
The power we're doing 16,000.
We gotta deal with that. We gotta,
Yeah, you get 6,000 in free cash in that
Right.
power. But that's, you can deal with that.
But that, if we miss something, we're in hot water, so I want to just be sure I've heard everything correctly. Just those 3 articles. There wasn't something later.
missing something?
We don't have to put the ballot for, the,
We can
deficit
check.
funds permit, no, we don't have to
And
do
what?
It's only
We can go through this tomorrow and make sure that you have, before your
and they were
Thursday
kinda
meeting,
fun.
an
We were, I
up-to-date
think,
list
against each other in
with
the
the
election.
numbers that you need
That would be
and
good.
all of that.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank you.
think you won on that.
You'll do that?
Well, you know what it's about.
Thank you.
Still holding your breath.
All right.
When's our next meeting?
We don't have one scheduled. I think, well, let's take a look at when this is gonna come together. I'll put out a request. Motion to adjourn?
Yes, we should.
Yeah,
Motion to adjourn.
Favor?
There you go.
yeah.
Vice Chair, motion to adjourn? Before we do, okay.